Welcome in, everyone. I hope you guys are doing great from wherever you're watching from right now. We have a topic to talk about today that's part warfare, part science fiction, part history, and that is President Donald Trump's dreams and goals and kind of already underway production to build what is referred to as the Golden Dome, which will be the world's most advanced air defense system. And it could render our biggest enemies, China and Russia, their missiles completely obsolete. Like I said, it's part science fiction. Part of it feels like it's out of a James Bond movie, but parts of it are already very real and very, very cool. We're going to get into all of that and much more. As always, please make sure to like and subscribe. Hit the bell so you always know when a new video is coming. And make sure to comment below with your thoughts. Now, let's get into it. So it's important to note that building a state-of-the-art air defense system or building a dome-style defense system is not exactly a new idea. Famously, President Ronald Reagan wanted to build a system that could shoot weapons and missiles coming from other countries, specifically nukes, right out of the sky, thus making it impossible to launch a first strike or retaliate against the United States with missiles. That project in the 80s was decades away from actually being feasible, although you will find it interesting. The Russians thought that it actually could be very real and then spent a bunch of time and money that they didn't really have trying to figure out how the United States was building this space defense system. Despite it never happening during the Reagan administration, the United States has continued to pour billions and billions and billions of dollars into figuring out a way, going all the way back to the 80s, to have a missile defense system that would make it close to impossible for China or Russia to ever get a nuke to hit the US. What's known about it is still highly classified. It is in the R&D phase. Other than we do know, we have missiles, interceptors that can be shot from naval ships. The F-35 has intercept capabilities, but a lot of that remains mostly untested, and it's unclear how it would work against an ICBM coming from Russia or China. Keep in mind, those missiles fired from a submarine could land in a matter of minutes, depending on where the sub is and where the target location is. However, President Trump, upon returning to office, made it clear he wanted to build a Golden Dome, which would be a blown up, much bigger version, no pun intended, of essentially what they have in Israel, which is the Iron Dome. The Iron Dome is great for stopping small rockets, missiles, things of that. Wouldn't be particularly good against heavy weapons that the Russians, the Chinese, or even the best ICBMs that the Iranians have. Of course, they have other systems to deal with Iran's best weapons. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. So this is a report from NBC News about the weapons program and options for this unprecedented weapon system that are being presented to Donald Trump. So I'm going to throw this up on the screen for you here right now. It says Defense Department officials will soon brief President Donald Trump on a variety of options for him to fulfill his pledge to protect the United States with something modeled on Israel's Iron Dome anti-missile defense system, according to U.S. officials and experts familiar with the initiative. Like former President Ronald Reagan, which we just talked about, pushed for the Strategic Defense Initiative, which was proposed to protect the U.S. from Soviet nuclear missiles, Trump's call for an Iron Dome for America, more often referred to as Golden Dome, is a signature endeavor that could sew together multiple air defense systems with the idea of keeping the country and perhaps eventually American assets around the world safe. The Strategic Defense Initiative, which has come to be known by its mocking nickname Star Wars, which we just said, was never operational and was all but canceled years after Reagan left office. That's not particularly accurate. Like I said, the funding was shifted elsewhere, and the United States has long continued to pour money in to figure out how to stop missiles from coming down here. Trump's plan is seen as more realistic than SDI was, given technological advances since the 1980s, but the biggest vision the administration is contemplating, including stopping nuclear missiles fired from another continent, could most likely be extremely expensive and take years. Continues, the intercontinental ballistic nuclear missiles Reagan wanted to protect us against can now be stopped to some extent, at least in theory. Israel's Iron Dome has largely been seen as successful in its job warding off small rockets and artillery attack. It has a clear and easier task than any U.S. system would, however. A country less than 1% as large as the United States protect from enemies next to it rather than oceans away. Trump's Golden Dome would most likely be a patchwork of systems that would need to stop a wide variety of threats, including cruise missiles fired from ships off the coast, ballistic missiles launched from countries such as Russia or China, attacks from drones inside the continental U.S., and state-of-the-art hypersonic missiles that can travel hundreds of miles in a single minute. It continues. Some elements of Golden Dome would involve simply repurposing, this is important, existing parts of the U.S. arsenal, such as surface-to-air defenses, destroyers, and fighter jets, like I talked about the F-35. Smaller scale moves like those could be completed in months or even weeks in some cases, officials said. But depending on the option Trump chooses, the U.S. might find itself spending hundreds of billions of dollars to develop new technologies that would become part of a defense system years down the road. So that's kind of the backdrop of what we're looking at. There's a little bit more to unwind here, and then we're going to really break it down, what I think about it, what having this incredible weapon system would mean, and much more. Let's talk about that right now. So we've already talked about what the short-term options to beef up missile defense system, fighter jets, naval ships, land-based interceptors, things like that, things that the U.S. has in its arsenal, things that work very, very, very well and we have used in the past. What about longer-term options when it comes to unleashing the full power of Golden Dome and cutting-edge technology, cutting-edge weapons that the world doesn't even know exist? What would that look like? Well, that's also covered here. I'm going to read it to you. Let me pop it up on the screen here for you all. The longer-term options also include creating a much larger network of space-based interceptors that can take out missiles soon after they are launched, when they are in what is known as the boost phase. Such a network could take years to complete and field, the official said. A goal under that plan would be to develop and deploy a proliferated warfighter space architecture, which is essentially a network of communication satellites. One of the most pressing threats to contend with is what is known as a fractional orbital bombardment system, which puts a warhead in orbit around the Earth and then drops it out of space onto a target quickly. China is already ahead of the U.S. in this specific thing, having tested such a system in 2021. So what they're saying there is Trump is trying to develop a weapon that will be a system, a connected system of satellites up in space that would be capable of blowing up nukes as they're coming through. What does this mean? Why is this important? What would this do for warfare? And how realistic is it? Let's go ahead and discuss that right now. The biggest advantage to the Golden Dome weapon system / missile defense system that President Trump is hell-bent on making is that it takes away the enemy's ability, specifically Russia and China being the big one that we're going to zoom in here in a second. It takes away their edge. It takes away their ability to reach out and touch you. It takes away essentially their nuclear triad. So the United States, Russia, and China all have a nuclear triad, which means you can launch missiles or nuclear bombs from air, land, or sea. Sea is submarines, air is obviously planes, land would be the ICBMs that are in, the launchers, tubes, missile silos, whatever it might be. China has the least dangerous nuclear triad. It doesn't really compare to what Russia has. It definitely doesn't compare to what the U.S. has, but it still exists. Why is that important? Well, because as we've talked about at length, there are growing fears of a potential war with China. In the event a war with China, we just talked about the Three Gorges Dam and other things, but in the event a war with China goes completely sideways, it gets as bad as it can get. It gets horrible. It's a bloodbath. They start firing missiles, we start firing missiles. If we can take away their ability to actually fire missiles, then they are likely going to hesitate and pull back. That's what makes this air defense, missile defense, weapon system so unbelievably devastating. It changes the calculus entirely. It stops the Chinese from being able to be aggressive because they know if it's operational, they're not going to be able to strike the United States, but the United States will be able to hit them with absolute impunity, and there's nothing they're going to be able to do about it. Now, that leads me to the how realistic part of this. Again, They've been researching this for 40 years. You got to remember the United States. A lot of our most advanced weapon systems that you see in use were being tested and developed 10, 20 years before anyone knew about it. Look at the stealth bomber. Stealth bomber started getting designed in the 80s. I believe officially went into service sometime between 93 and 95. Look at the B-21. That only recently the first one was put out. And that was being developed, I believe, in the mid-2010s, late 2010s. So you're talking 15-year gaps, 10-year gaps. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I know for sure how realistic the space aspect of it all is. But here's what I do know. It's being developed. It's being tested. And the fact Trump's publicly talking about it should tell you all that he feels confident they're going to get it done. Because by talking about it, you're incentivizing Russia and China to try to further modernize to beat it. You wouldn't do that if you weren't confident you were actually going to get this thing to work, right? You'd only be encouraging them to arm up and get stronger and then not actually have anything to show for it on our end. So I actually do believe there are some teeth to these stories for sure. I do believe the weapon is being developed. I believe the weapon systems are being developed on top of what we already have, which is, again, naval ships, land-based interceptors, the F-35 can intercept missiles, and all of that stuff. Trump wants to build what will be essentially the world's greatest weapon and the biggest shield of a weapon you've ever seen. Because nukes are essentially a sword. This would be a shield and nobody else would have a shield. So we could hit anyone we wanted and they wouldn't be able to hit us. It would be devastating for America's enemies. It might be enough to stop Chinese aggression just by itself. That's speculation. We're looking at all the pieces here, but it's something to consider. But I want you to comment below with what you think about the Golden Dome weapons project that Trump is pursuing. Make sure to like and subscribe. And as always, I'll see you guys next time.